folks. Welcome to episode 68 of Cookie Pocket. Today, I am in the host chair, and I decided that I wanted a smackdown today. I decided, it was time to rumble. Let's get ready to rumble. And so I brought Lucio Fulci's The Beyond to the table. Now, Lucio Fulci is a contentious director amongst this group. He directed Zombi 2, which I showed the guys, it might have been like 2-3 years ago now. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
Really? I don't even know.
And I think it might be the first film I ever showed Christian that he just actively hated. So there's a history here. The Beyond is known as sort of Lucio Fulci's magnum opus. It's the second film in his Gates of Hell trilogy, which are all about a gate or entrance to hell in some way, shape, or form. It's a sort of loose thematic trilogy. In this one, a young woman named Liza inherits a hotel in New Orleans, which she does not know, but it's built over potentially an entrance to hell. And as she starts trying to fix up the hotel and get it ready for guests, it's in a pretty bad state. The basement's totally flooded. The rooms are all empty. The electricity barely works, and she has like 3 people working on the house who are all a little shady. Strange things start to happen, and people begin to die as the gate to hell starts to take effect. So let's not beat around the bush. I'm ready to wince. What did you guys think of Lucio Fulci's The Beyond?
I'm curious as to what Christian wants to say. Just instinctively.
Well, I don't really want to say anything.
I know.
That's the problem here. So I watched this 3 or 4 days ago now, which is rare. I usually watch these the day of or the day before. And so all of the vitriol has been filtered out of my body, and I'm left with indifference and apathy, which, is maybe better for some of us. It's probably not better for the case I'm going to make, as I'll make it with less vigor, but I don't like this, and I don't think it has value. I don't. I gave it a 1 out of 5. I think I'm sure we're going to reach this comparison point.
Sure.
Anyway, I think Suspiria is better. I think Suspiria is more of a movie than this is.
Okay.
It has more of a story, and there are like bits and pieces of Suspiria that I appreciated abstractly. Even if I was in a worse mood when we recorded that one than perhaps we're recording this one. And I just, on some level, when we talk about movies, I still understand why people like this.
Okay.
I just don't understand why people insist on saying it's good, which sounds horrifically pretentious, but... And we're going to get into the whole subjective-objective thing again. I've just opened up Pandora's box. I've opened the gateway into hell.
One of the 7.
One of the 7.
Yes. I just think that at some point, my favorite genre is probably, loosely speaking, romantic comedy, you might say.
Yeah.
Given my track record with, Linklater and Beautiful Girls, which we talked about, and whatnot. But I still am very comfortable giving, To All the Boys I've Loved Before a 1 star. I think there is... I still understand why people enjoy that, but I don't think that is, an achievement, necessarily. And I guess some of the gore here is an achievement for its time. I can't say that I was really scared by any of it. Maybe that's just because of all that Zach showed me at this point. I don't know, man. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. We'll get into it more, but since I'm sort of the argument against, I guess I don't have too much to say at the moment. It just really doesn't carry anything for me, so 1 out of 5.
Sorry. We'll come back to, obviously we'll come back to this. We have a whole episode about it, but I do want to talk about the different perspectives here, especially... I wasn't even going to bring up the comparison between Suspiria and The Beyond, but if we want to get into that, I think that's worth getting into, how the 2 movies are similar in some ways, but in most ways very, very different, and yet, Christian, you dislike them both for similar reasons, I think. But Mitchell, what did you think?
I'll say really briefly. We'll talk about it later. I was gonna say for Suspiria, I liked Suspiria better, but I thought it was objectively worse, and I just used the O word again. I think that Suspiria builds tension, like period. It builds tension, and I also feel like there's enough to invest in the story, and there's enough mystery where it feels like I want to know what happens next, and this does not really have that very much. For me, I really don't feel like there's much motivation for me to want to know what happens next and to invest myself in the plot. However, for this, I definitely think, and I'm not trying to compare my ratings or anything. I gave Suspiria 2.5 in its own right, and I'm giving this 3 stars in its own right. But I really appreciate how intentional everything kind of feels. Like I think. I'm not going to say the acting was purposely bad, but I'm going to say the atmosphere and the gore effects and the filming of the violent scenes in contrast to the slower scenes feels pretty good. Like I honestly can really feel like the atmosphere definitely is like well framed, and I there's no denying that for me. But the actual dialogue is bad. It's terrible. I don't like the conversations, but dubbing aside, I don't like what they're talking about. I don't care about the story very much at all. However, the self-contained scenes where there's a transition and like a rising action and a climax and all of that, when it comes to each individual scene, I think they're very, very intriguing. And I know they're not like entirely original, and I know there is some kind of derivative things here and there. But for the most part, I mean, I like the way that the actual like deaths were filmed. I'm not gonna say like it was like groundbreaking or anything, but it was interesting. I'll say that, and I think it was. I mean, I thought it was kind of cool, and I don't think it's realistic. It doesn't hold well, obviously, to time or anything, but I think there is something to appreciate for the way that the actual gore was filmed, and I don't feel like there's a lot of like. I don't really think there's very many deep like discussions to really be had about like the philosophy behind the story and things like that. But from an aesthetic standpoint, from a horror style standpoint, I can definitely see the appeal, and that's why I rated it a 3.
Mitchell, I think you've hit upon a lot of the technical points that perhaps on a more literal level make this not a good story. I was talking we got together for reasons that'll probably come up in a week in review this episode yesterday, and I was talking to Christian briefly about how this movie was not filmed with a shooting script. Lucio Fulci had a 3-page treatment, and most of the scenes were based around him saying, what if we did this to the people on set, and then they built a scene around that on the day. Which I think means that the scenes in this movie, I think, work as really well-contained little stories of their own. Like, I think a lot of these scenes could be plucked out of this film and put into, like, an anthology movie, and you'd be like, wow, that was a cool little bit. A plumber goes into a creepy basement that's flooded with water, and a hand comes out of a wall and grabs him. A woman goes into a bathroom, and the bath is plugged up with dirty water. She undoes the plug, and there's a corpse in there, and it attacks her. Like, these are solid little, almost like scary stories to tell in the dark style ideas that I think hit upon like really classic creepy imagery that works really well within the scenes, but how they mesh together I think is a little uneven. And I think the stuff that you would typically incorporate as like through lines in a traditional script, things like the painter who's killed at the beginning of the film. In some of my favorite shots in the movie, I love that opening sepia sequence of the film. But the painter who's killed at the beginning, you get a sense that he's going to come back in some significant way, or perhaps the movie is going to be about redeeming him or discovering why he was killed. And it's just not. They never come back to it, really. He shows up, but that sort of traditional aspect of what you would do in a usual screenplay isn't really there. That being said, I still find this movie really riveting, and I really do. I really do love it. It's I think it is that atmosphere that you mentioned, Mitchell. That atmosphere, the way that the gore is laid out, the pacing. I really love the score. I know there are a lot of people who don't like these Italian horror scores, but I really like what they communicate, and I really like the different approach that they take to portraying horror in a sonic way, where it's not approached in anything resembling what you would typically consider in like an American or British horror film, where you'd get like some low violin or some synths in the background to like just a little ba-da-ba or something. You'll get like a groovy disco tune during a scene where a woman is being jammed against a nail on a wall. And I think that bizarre contrast really works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, obviously, but it really works for me, and it leaves me gripped and leaves me thinking about those decisions and makes me really attracted to the film. So it's a 4 out of 5 for me. We'll get into more reasons as to why I like it with later questions. But I really do like this movie, and right now it's my favorite Fulci. Now, I've only seen 8 of Fulci's 48 movies.
Only 8.
So it could be surpassed at some point. But this is definitely my favorite Fulci so far. So I think let's we're getting into leaving Las Vegas territory here, but I want to establish that I'm not picking on Christian here, but I do want to introduce his Letterboxd review to the discussion. Wow. Christian's Letterboxd review, last I checked, was concise and brief. It merely stated 1 star, utterly worthless schlock. So, which is fine. I admire a man who can state his thoughts in a concise manner. Yeah. But I do want to. I want to go AP English on you guys here, Christian and Mitchell, and I want to address. Although Christian, you've written worthless in the review, I think based upon this film's reputation and based upon the other ratings that it has on sites like IMDb and Letterboxd, it's pretty clear that for a lot of people there is some worth in this. People do get something out of it, and there are a lot of filmmakers that I think we all respect to at least some degree who really like this movie. This is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite films. So I wanna do a bit of a speculative thing here and say, what do you guys think is the worth of this film to those people? What do you think people like Tarantino or Joe Schmo on Letterboxd who really like this film and think it's high art, what do you think they're seeing in it that gives them that opinion?
This is a good question, Zach. I mean that sincerely. I was going to say this in a mean way, but I'll say it in a more thoughtful way. Like, the gore is impressive. I'll give it that. Like, the effects are occasionally, like, cool looking, and I'm sure for the time, what was this, like, 81?
Yeah, 81 or 80, yeah.
I mean, yeah, a lot of it looks like, I feel like there was, like, an eye thing that was pretty convincing. Gosh. What was I going to say? Oh, the mean thing I was going to say was that you could almost, like, cut out all of the weird, bad conversations and, like, ADR-heavy transition moments and get, like, a really nice, like, 20-minute YouTube compilation of scary kills, horror stuff. And I would almost, like, understand that more than this film. Because you have to do a lot of working through the mire of it. And I mean, I did it. I watched it. I looked down only to write things for the rundown. And it was brutal. I feel like it was brutal. But the other thing is, like, if you're somebody that wants to make films or makes films, then you're always going to, like, interpret that differently than somebody that just watches them or just wants to have fun. Like when I can't shut up about music theory and you guys are like, yeah, shut up, Christian, and I'm like, yeah, but the secondary dominant chord and
let me like Blue Jay Way, for God's sake.
Yes. No, it's a good song. Anyway, it's just, artists hear things differently. People are different. People have different limits. I could abstractly understand that, but I also think that this is such a, like, individual bizarre cult thing that of course it's going to be highly reviewed because the only people that are going to seek this thing out are the people that really think they're going to like it. Like there's not a lot of like casual movie watchers that aren't like horror buffs that will seek this out and like it. I really think that if like I got my whole family to watch this, I think they would all hate it. I just do. So
I don't doubt that.
Well, you're all related to them, Christian. That's bias.
Yes, I think if I got my whole, I think
neighborhood, if we got the whole neighborhood, like
yes,
like 90% at least.
Yeah. If I got like if our high school class watched it, I think the vast majority would dislike it. You know, whatever.
You just don't understand the high art.
I'm trying to think of the 10%
You're not
who
based in Fulci
would
pills.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
I am not based or Fulci pilled. Zach, I know you want me to say more, and I'm really trying. I just can't.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Mitchell, what's your opinion on this?
Well, I'm not gonna go as far as to say it's high art.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say that because it doesn't redefine a genre. Is also like a main like deciding factor for me. Like the spaghetti westerns we were talking about. That's like redefining a genre in multiple facets. And I don't think having a less impressive story and a non-important plot is redefining the genre. I feel like that is just readjusting your priorities to visually storytell and kind of initiate an emotional response based off of what you're seeing and hearing and feeling as a result. And I don't think it's not something you need to like fully conceptualize. I think it's just Fulci's interpretation of how we interpret fear, I guess. Mm-hmm. And especially I will say there's a ton of recency bias for that because of how much crap has come out since 1981 and how desensitized we've been to a lot of aspects of the fear that the so-called fear he's trying to get out of us. And for that I can appreciate, because I can definitely see why he's doing what he's doing when it comes to emphasizing the gore and kind of using the gore as the catalyst to incite the fear of the unknown and things like that. And I can see the value in that, and I can see his intention. It's just I think that's really where the polarization comes from is kind of like understanding where he's coming from and trying to figure out why he's using that aspect of horror, I guess, and instead of every other aspect of horror, or a lot of regular films, oh my god, American films and European films, and even I'll say Asian horror as well. Just kind of, it's a completely different ball game. When it comes to Italian horror, and I can totally respect that. And I'm not going to say it was a completely failed attempt, and I'm not going to say it was new high art and I just don't understand kind of thing. But it's definitely somewhere in between, and especially after seeing Suspiria and Zombie 2, I'm starting to get that a lot more. But I'm not coming around, Zach. You're not going to convert me.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I am also somebody who is not going to label The Beyond as high art. I don't think Lucio Fulci makes high art, and I don't think he thought he made high art either. I don't think the man who made Zombie 2, a film in which a woman strips naked to scuba dive with a shark that again gets into a fight with a zombie, thought that he was making high art. That said, despite the fact that he made kind of trashy movies, and I think he knew it, that's not to say that he didn't have a recognizable vision as a director. Because I do think Fulci has a real style, I think he has a real vision, and I think there is a real authorship to the kind of films that he makes that is really interesting and really noticeable. And I think one of the reasons that I gravitate towards films like The Beyond and films in sort of the Italian horror subgenre that the nation has kind of carved out for itself is kind of that randomosity. I mean, not every Italian horror film was shot with a 3-page treatment and just a director and a cinematographer coming up with ideas on the fly. But I think the fact that you could do that within the Italian studio system is really creatively liberating to me as like an idea. The idea of like you're not bound to a story, you're not bound to a script, you can just do ideas and see what works. And I really do think, I mean, it's going to sound like a bad pun here, but I think a lot of the time Fulci's films represent, you know, throwing spaghetti against a wall and seeing what sticks. And I think, and I'm not going to say that all the time it sticks. I mean, Fulci has some really, really bad movies. I mean, you guys don't like this one. I didn't make you watch A Cat in the Brain. Some of his movies are really bad, and the spaghetti doesn't stick. But I think films where his ideas do stick and kind of work together with this like bizarre, dreamlike logic really work for me. I mean, I love that in a Fulci movie, a vat of acid can just tip over and then start oozing across the room towards a girl, and it's just, well, that's happening because that's what's happening in the scene. I love that in a Fulci film, a glass window can shatter and seemingly fly entirely at one person to kill him and only him. I love that in a Fulci film, a gun could never run out of ammunition in the finale until the point when the lead character decides that he doesn't need it anymore and just throws it across the room. And these are things that, I mean, this might seem vaguely hypocritical because these are things that in other films would bother me, but in a Fulci film and in Italian horror films, they don't. They feel like part of the mood. They feel like part of the environment to me, and it just works. So I think that boils down to you just got to feel the vibes, man. So this has been a very insightful episode all around. I mean, I don't want to drag this out too long for you guys, but I did want to also point out that this film was shot, for the most part, entirely on actual locations in and around New Orleans in Louisiana. The actual house that they shot at was for the hotel, that is, was an actual historical house in the area that was very old, that the production actually damaged the flooring of, and they had to pay the state of Louisiana back to do repairs. But that aspect of being filmed in actual locations in and around Louisiana, do you feel that affected your viewing, or do you feel that affected your interpretation of the setting at all, that gave to maybe affect your viewing in a way that something like Suspiria, which is filmed entirely on sets that were constructed for the film, is a different experience?
I definitely think in terms of the atmosphere and I've played a lot of games, especially that have taken place in Louisiana, and they also happen to be kind of horror related, because I mean, all of the common stereotypes you can associate with that part of the U.S. is definitely, you can definitely, that fits the vibe of the Italian Gothic kind of, you know, the everything's very mysterious and hazy, and there's things that happen that don't make any sense, and you see things that aren't there, and I think that totally fits the vibe well. And I mean, for me, like, knowing whether or not it's on location, like, as a factual statement, doesn't bother me enough, because I feel like we've definitely seen movies that have taken place in other places that feel, you know, like their places. Like we were just watching, like Fistful of Dollars feels like that could probably be the Old West. I wouldn't really, you know, I wouldn't think anything of it. Yeah, I do think there is a little bit of an American, you know, layer to it as well. And I mean, obviously the dubbing pretty much just like kills that at the outset. But you know, I think the whole mystery of that location and the small town vibes and the different buildings, and like you said, the actual like building they filmed it in, totally, I mean, that was totally convincing. I think it totally contributes to the atmosphere. I don't think it detracts from the atmosphere at all, and I think it was definitely a good choice in this case.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I'm just indifferent, I guess. I think Suspiria is a bit more involving just because it has more locations total. Okay. This wasn't quite like closed room enough for me to really get a ton of feeling out of the setting.
Okay.
Is it okay if I respond to what you said about the whole script thingy, Zach?
Oh yeah, totally. Go ahead.
Lack thereof.
This is a loose structure. You can go back and forth as much as you want.
Just like the Fulci movie.
A few weekend reviews ago, I talked about watching some of Greta Gerwig's old projects where she was sort of writing this, what's called mumblecore, where there's a ton of improvisation and a lot of like almost like home video style cinematography and this sort of aspiration towards something real instead of something written and performed. And I appreciated them for what they were, which felt to me more like creative experiments than films unto themselves.
Okay.
And I think that at some point the same thing applies here. You've got some interesting scares and some bits and pieces that work, but this is almost, to me, more like a special feature than it is a complete film. And to just overlook like all of the things that we think about as aspects of a film, at some point I think conventions exist because they work, and most of the time the not convention things work less or are less of a mold of success or whatever. So I see why it appeals to you, Zach. I see why it appeals to other filmmakers and horror buffs, but I really think to an audience, a less horror interested audience, I really just think too much of it falls flat.
So let's set the dubbing aside for a sec, because we talk about the dubbing in all the Italian films. It's a go-to. That's not going to be good. Let's just set that aside for a sec. In terms of conventions that this disregards, are you strictly talking the lack of an exact, precise narrative A to B to C? Because I'll point out here that we do have conventions that exist in like experimental and abstract film where those things don't always happen, and yet those films are still a thing in America and are still a thing that finds success here on some sort of circuit at least.
Sure. I guess it's more of a bunch of littler things. Like, I don't think the performers are very good.
Okay.
I don't think the dialogue's well written. I don't think... what was I about to say? Gosh, I just totally blanked. The other sound. I know we're not talking about the dubbing because that's a given, but
yeah,
just the ADR in general, I think, is kind of sparse. I don't usually notice when a film is all ADR. I certainly didn't notice for A Fistful of Dollars. I thought that was executed great, but here it just felt not asynchronous, but just incomplete to me. Maybe I don't know. I'm picky about sound sometimes.
Yeah,
and I don't like the score. I hate the score. I think it subtracts from any tension I might have felt from the scores and the kill, or the scares and the kills rather. So.
That's interesting because one of my favorite aspects of this movie is the Foley. I love how deep and bassy a lot of the sounds are. I specifically think of when Joe is in the basement for the first time and the hole kind of breaks through the wall and the hand comes out. And there's like a roar in the background. It's got this very like deep like reverberation to it that's really startling. And I really like how the Foley sounds in this. But I don't know. I mean, to each their own, of course.
That moment's good. I guess just all of it. I don't know. There's just like a lot of dead sound otherwise, and less involving moments. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's pretty hit or miss. I think it really depends on the actual. Well, I think it depends on a lot of things, but there are some scenes where I feel like the unconventional nature of the score contributes to the horror itself. Like I think it's trying to make things unexpected in a highly unconventional way, and I don't feel like it's necessarily aimless. I wouldn't say it's like completely thoughtless, but I would say that it's Fulci's got he has his own sense of what induces fear, kind of what I was saying. And I think I do think it's consistent. I will say it's like he is consistent in his unconventional ways, and I don't but I think it's totally hit or miss, because there are some moments where I do agree with Christian. It's dead, and I don't really understand what I'm supposed to be feeling, and then all of a sudden a random like, you know, I read a lot of reviews that were saying it's like 70s porn, like moaning and weird, bizarre sounds, and they don't make any sense. And I will say, I forgot to mention this and a couple things back, in Silent Hill 2, which is like one of my favorite psychological horror games ever. There are a lot of weird clanging noises in the fog that make no sense. You have no idea where it's coming from or what it is. and it's bizarre, but it totally fits the atmosphere. And in this case, I can agree that for the most part, I think it totally fits the atmosphere. It's unconventional, and I'm not going to say it's like, wow, this is a whole new way of doing it. We should make more of these and turn it into a big universe, cinematic universe of Fulci films. But but it's like, it's something to appreciate, and I can see the intent behind it, and that's as far as I'm going to go with that.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair. On the New Orleans point, I'll just point out that, I mean, I think you guys covered some good ground here. I think there are some great locations in this movie, but I do think it sort of underuses New Orleans.
Yeah.
Because there is a real sort of tradition of superstition in New Orleans. I think that means that like a ghost story there is kind of a natural, and this film kind of taps into that, but not really. I think the places that it best makes use of actual settings are the sequence on the highway bridge, which is a very kind of like dreamy, bizarre image of Liza just driving down the center of this highway with nobody else on it, and then Emily and her dog are just smack in the middle. That's a very bizarre image, and I think a very good use of a pre-existing location. And the above ground cemetery in the middle of the city that shows up in like one scene. There's something about like cemeteries in city settings where like there you can just see like skyscrapers all around the cemetery that really like weirds me out for some reason, and that's like a personal thing, but it's just it feels bizarre to have all that death in such close proximity to people working and going about their everyday lives and eating and getting sandwiches and lunch at work and whatnot. Now, I do think that strikes a weird chord with me, that I think it's unfortunate that that's only really used in one scene. But, I mean, that pretty much taps in everything that I wanted to discuss here. Any final thoughts before we move on to our other segments?
Mitchell, you first.
Mitchell, me first. I don't hear that very often. Man, I don't know, man. You just gotta know what you're getting into. I feel like. I mean, I haven't seen any other Fulci films, but based on what I've seen,
you've seen Zombi too.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, with I think The Beyond is an honest try for anyone who wants to understand Italian horror, if they can even understand it. and it's very unconventional, and it's definitely one of those things where you have to have some grasp of what it takes to make a film, let alone a horror film. And I think it's a 3 out of 5 for me. I didn't like it. It's not my thing at all, but Christian, go ham.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that you gave it a higher rating than Suspiria, Mitchell. That intrigues me. But we kind of already discussed that.
Yeah.
Gosh, I had something really specific to say. Oh, yes. I feel that I have been unfairly attributed the reputation of the puritanical cookie pocketer that wags his straight finger at Zach and says, no, child, that is not proper. And, especially with season 1, we started off with like the Changeling and the Final Countdown, and at the time those both got 1s from me. So I really did not start out on the right foot, you might say. But at this point in my life and career as a cinephile, I consider myself, relatively speaking, a fan of most horror movies. Mm-hmm. And the vast majority of what Zach and Mitchell have shown me are things that I enjoyed or could otherwise find valuable aspects.
Okay.
So this is all to say that I think this sucks. I'm sorry, but I do. And Zach, you've wasted, how much of my life have you wasted? Okay, so it was like roughly 90 minutes of a movie, and now we're at like almost 35 minutes. You've wasted 2 hours of my life with more Italian horror Don't do this to me again, Zach. Do you want to watch Paul Blart Mall Cop 2? Is that what you want to do yourself?
I have an Italian horror movie in every season I have planned for the next 5 seasons.
Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna find some Kevin James and
yeah.
Christian is going to make Paul Blart Mall Cop 3.
I'm going to.
I'll help you make it.
Micro budget.
Hype.
Yeah.
I'm
Only
ready.
a 3-page script treatment, I'm sure.
It would be better than the second one.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I mean, Kevin James has got to eat.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've voiced my thoughts on the film pretty extensively at this point. It's a 4 out of 5 for me. I will say, if there's anybody listening to this who is a fan of Fulci and hasn't seen The Beyond somehow, everybody talks about Fulci's eye thing. Fulci loves to gouge eyes out in his films.
Yeah.
And you get 2 of them in this movie, but I think there's an underappreciated trend for the Fulci headshot. There's a great one in the film The New York Ripper, but this has a fantastic headshot effect in the climax that, if you're about to fall asleep, will make you go, wow! I really do love the climax of this film, and it has some fantastic gore effects. So yeah, that's my little Fulci fanboy moment over. And we're moving on to the week in review. Do you guys want to do a combined week in review? Okay.
Don't put me in a cage, Zach.
So last
Any
night,
kind of cage.
as Christian is alluding to, we gathered at my abode atop the Carpathian Mountains and watched a series of 3 Nicolas Cage films. Birdie, Matchstick Men, and I of course had to add Mandy. It's one of my favorite films. So that was the trilogy. So why don't we open with our first one? What did we think of the underdog of the evening, Birdie?
Oh, I loved it. I really, really loved it. I was so uncertain going into it. I had no idea what to expect. And the first 20 minutes had me a bit unnerved, and I wasn't sure where it was going. And then it just clicks. Cage is fantastic. Modine is very enigmatic and unsettling, appropriately so. And they play off of each other really well. Their friendship is really believable, which can be difficult to do when you're dealing with these sort of archetypal, especially Cage is kind of just like the jock that everyone likes. And it incorporates aspects of war and trauma pretty sensibly, I would say, and effectively. And it's 2 hours long, but I feel like all of its runtime is used very economically. And it's just really surprisingly emotional and thoughtful. And the dialogue is fantastic. Like a lot of the scenes with Cage in the mental hospital, especially when he's shouting at his the doctor and he's shouting at Birdie, and it's so good. And the ending is so hilarious and unexpected and great. And give it a try, man. It's something. It's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like the dynamic narrative and how it really did not feel disjointed at all. Like, I had a total sense of, for various reasons, I had a total sense of, like, where we were and why we were invested in Birdie, and how much of his mental illness was influenced by him being in Vietnam, and how much of Al's experience in Vietnam affected him and his interpretation of events, and what was their life like before, what were their priorities, how did they develop their relationship, how did people treat Birdie before going to Vietnam. And you can kind of see, like, how everybody's just completely mistreating them, and I think it's really engaging because you don't really see that very often, or if you do, it's very one note. Like somebody comes back from Vietnam and then everyone treats them like crap because of whatever political stuff. And
Rambo.
And they just, Rambo basically. Or like how in the 70s how they treat mental illness, and like lack of access of things. But for this, it was a lot more deeper psychologically, and I really enjoyed that. Seeing Matthew Modine go back to Vietnam again. and I enjoy him as a person more in Full Metal Jacket, which I don't even know how much that's saying, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I originally had a totally different roster for Nicolas Cage night, because Nicolas Cage is one of my favorite actors. This evening was my idea, because I wanted to show the guys how great of an actor Nicolas Cage was. And originally I had a totally different roster. And then kind of at the last minute, I was like, I'll put Birdie on there. We'll see. But yeah, I think it went over really well. And I said in my review on Letterboxd that Birdie is a movie that kind of does everything well. When it's trying to be funny, I think it's really funny. When it's trying to be heartfelt and nostalgic, it really hits that heartfelt nostalgia. And I particularly like how it does that without ever putting rose-tinted glasses on the characters.
Yeah.
You see their youth in the city where they grew up, and everything looks terrible. Everything is like covered in trash, and the houses are run down, and I don't think there's ever a really sunny day, but it is where they grew up, and it's the memories that they had, and it matters to them, and you feel that. I mean, when it's showing Vietnam, like the sequence where Birdie's helicopter crashes, there's a protracted fly cam shot of all the different bodies around the helicopter, and just all this mangled flesh on the ground, and it's genuinely horrifying. And then, like 10 minutes after that, the ending just slaps you in the face, and La Bamba plays, and you don't quite know what to do with yourself. I do think, I was thinking of a lot of ways that it could end throughout that I was like, oh, that won't be good. Oh, that won't be good. And I don't know everything before the exact precise moment that it ends. I'm not going to say that it doesn't fumble the bag a little bit. I do think the monologue that Cage gives that kind of brings Modine out of it is a little clunky and a little sappy.
Boo.
And I think that Birdie not really... I mean, they built up Birdie's condition to the point that any reason for him snapping out of it would have felt like kind of a letdown. But I do feel like that kind of is an issue that the ending has. But as soon as the actual ending happens, the movie sort of just slaps you in the face and says, what you going to do about it? And you go, I'm sorry, Mr. Birdie, I'm not going to do anything. And then that's the end of your viewing. So 4 stars from me. After that, we watched Matchstick Men, which was... I thought was going to be the contender for the most underwhelming of the night. I thought it was going to suffer from the sophomore slump. But what did you guys think of it?
It was great. It was freaking great, man. I don't think I mentioned I gave Birdie a 4.5.
Yeah.
I gave Matchstick Men a 4. And... that was a lot to do with the ending. It really got me, hook, line, and sinker. Big time spoiler warning on this one. It's really, I think even Zach would agree with me here that you should go in blind as much as possible here.
Definitely.
They con you as well as the victim of the con, you may say. What's her name? Alison Lohman plays Angela in this film, and she's phenomenal. I'm really surprised that she hasn't been in more stuff. I guess she's been in like a Raimi film and a Big Fish, and those are like the 2 other more viewed things that she has been in.
Which are both really good, but yeah.
Yes, both on my list. But yeah, she's the heart of this, and she and Cage play off of each other really, really well. About an hour or so into this, I was like, man, Zach is right. Cage is freaking awesome. What have I been doing? I've been sleeping on Nicolas Cage my entire life. So congrats, Zach. You totally got me. Yeah, Ridley Scott's still a good director. 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I think a lot of the beats towards the end were... I mean, I was literally saying things as they were happening towards the end, and it definitely got predictable. I feel like the con parts of it definitely got predictable for me, but man, just by virtue of the fact that this isn't really about the con, like it isn't really about him being a con man, and it's more about Nicolas Cage's character. I feel like that is really like the heart and soul of this, and his relationship with his daughter, and that whole thing I think plays out pretty naturally, and it's pretty encaging. That's why I gave it a 4.
I do think it. I mean, I think it works really well as a con movie. But I think more than it being a con movie, kind of the umbrella is it's a movie about Nicolas Cage's character kind of being given like a chance to realize what he really wants in life. And he sort of gets a second chance at getting that by the conclusion. I also want to point out the editing in the movie, particularly toward the beginning, I think is really fantastic because the editing puts you in the mindset of Cage's character with all his different like obsessive tics and twitches, and it does that with the color grading and constantly jumping over the 180 degree line. So you're like, whoa, wait, what's going on? Stop cutting.
Like Marilyn Manson, Beautiful People,
a little bit. But then as the movie goes on, that lessens a bit as you feel Cage kind of normalizing into this routine. It never totally goes away, just as Cage's tics never totally go away, but it definitely calms down. It was a 4 out of 5 from me as well. And Sam Rockwell isn't in it a ton. He's more of a co-star than a real headlining star. But I think he has some great lines in this. Yeah. Particularly toward the beginning, he has some really funny lines.
They also really utilize the importance of his character later on, even though he's not actually there.
Yeah. Okay, and then the night ended with Mandy, which is one of my absolute favorite films. But I knew going in that Mandy was going to be the one that was going to be the Marmite of the evening. So yeah, what did you guys think of Mandy?
It was good. 3 out of 5. I mean, I didn't dislike it. I don't think it's perfect, but I can see why you love it, Zach. I like that it is totally visually distinct. I can't think of anything that is quite as psychedelic and red as it is. and kudos to them for being points for being original wherever anyone is, really. I guess that's probably why Fulci wasn't a half star, honestly. I would have liked more of Andrea Riseborough. I've seen some other reviews that said that you're really meant to invest in her more than in Cage's character.
Right.
And so, like, I saw a suggestion maybe it would have made more sense if Cage was killed and she was the one on the rampage or whatever. I don't know. Perhaps. I like the early dialogue, like the Galactus stuff. It just it really doesn't. It didn't need to be that slow. It didn't. I know you love it, Zach. it just just trim it like a tiny bit, maybe. I also don't like the villain that much. I think he's kind of ham-fisted, handled well enough, and predictably, I think the religious imagery is kind of a lazy shorthand.
What were you just saying like 10 minutes ago?
About my Puritanism? Yeah. Well, no, it's just become a trope,
I know. I agree.
But whatever, it's fine. 3 out of 5. If you like horror, you'll probably like it. Cage is great. Yeah.
Yeah, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I also think Cage is great. I think once again, I kind of have similar criticisms that I had for this that I would have for Fulci. But in this case, I think the psychedelic aspects certainly work for the style. I think it's very, very. I mean, yeah, I agree with Christian. It is very slow. But I wouldn't say it's not like it feels incoherent, but like it feels intentionally incoherent, I guess. And I feel like a lot of the shot. I mean, all of the shots feel very calculated to me. And I feel like the story beats are purposely, mixed together and confused in a way that's recognizable enough where you can give it props, I guess. And no, it's not like it's not totally out there and crazy, but it's also not like, it's definitely not like a great story or anything. And I think it's being weird to be weird for a lot of things. And yeah, I can really respect the way that they did it, and I totally think it's a compelling thing to look at. Is it a compelling thing to like follow all the way to the end? I mean, I guess. I don't know. I kind of knew what was going to happen. I knew that there was a revenge plot. It was kind of just the style of the revenge and kind of conveying that emotion of revenge through said style, through LSD trips, and that's fine.
Okay, I mean, I totally see what you're saying here. I mean, as we've established here, I love Mandy. Mandy is a 5 out of 5 film for me, and I think one of the reasons that it works for me where it doesn't for a lot of other people is I think a lot of other people are keen to see this as a rampage film. They're keen to see this as a slasher film, as a revenge film. I think more than any of those, it's an Arthurian legend on LSD. This very much to me has the feel of the knight has to go on a quest to slay this creature that has attacked him or that has somehow hurt him or killed someone that he knows, which I think is why I think it perfectly nails the pace of a lot of those old myths and legends, because if you read a lot of those, they have exciting bits, but a lot of it is, and he journeyed through the woods, for 18 days, stopping only to sleep. And he slew the Dark Knight and drank some of his potion. And of course, if you were in the situation, you would go, why is he drinking the potion? But the fact that it does have that sort of aura of a legend about it means that, at least for me, you're kind of willing to accept that as something that those kinds of characters do and something that happens in that kind of a story. So I really love the mood of it. I think cinematography-wise, it's some of the most beautiful imagery I've ever seen in a movie. There's some movies that, as a filmmaker, you watch and it almost kind of depresses you because you know you can never make anything that good.
Yeah.
And Mandy kind of is that kind of film for me. So it's a 5 out of 5, and I think if you're at all interested by the premise or the look of it, I'd really recommend you check it out. Well, I guess we can move on from week in review. I know we're not doing a munitions minute for this one, so I guess that means it's time for the Marvelous Cinema Tour. The Marvelous Cinema Tour theme is provided by a strangled kazooist in the corner. So this week I'm talking about Thor: The Dark World. And what I'll say about this film is it's definitely better than the first Thor for me. Or I should say more entertaining than the first Thor. But I think visually and narratively and as a production, it is much, much, much more bland. This is kind of the first time that Marvel hired sort of a no-name director to make one of these films. It's under the presumption, I suppose, that he might be a bit of a yes man and kind of do what they wanted him to do. I can't confirm that, but it's kind of the vibe that I get. Kenneth Branagh, who directed the first Thor film, Thor is still my least favorite film in the MCU, but he brought a style to that, and he brought a real sort of Shakespearean influence to it. I mean, he's a Shakespearean actor and director, that makes sense. If Shakespeare was the reference for those films, the big reference point here seems to be Lord of the Rings trilogy, which I mentioned in my Letterboxd review. But I think the issue with that is, if you want to do Lord of the Rings, either Peter Jackson's or Ralph Bakshi's, you need a real sense of imaginative scale and spectacle that I think the director of this film, I don't even remember his name, Andrew something, I think?
Alan Taylor.
Sorry,
Alan Taylor. I don't think he has. I mean, he's directed mostly for TV and a few other things, and I don't mean to discredit him by any means. I think Terminator Genesis, yeah. I do think this has some exciting moments, but I do think that it lacks that scope of something like Lord of the Rings. That means that it doesn't quite hit what it's going for. I also think a lot of people. I also think this might have one of those boring villains in the MCU. And he's played by Christopher Eccleston, which is such a shame because I love Christopher Eccleston. He's my favorite actor to ever play the Doctor on Doctor Who. I think he's great in early Danny Boyle movies that he's in. But Malekith, his entire motivation pretty much is just to be evil. And that's like all that he has or does. Which I think might be the reason that I remembered nothing about the villains of this movie going in. I think there's some kind of an interesting dynamic between him and the Accursed, who is like the heavy of this film, who I had no memory of whatsoever going into this. I remembered Malekith, but I didn't remember the Accursed at all, which seems weird because he kills Loki. Well, kills Loki. And I knew that Loki died, but I didn't remember how. There's a lot in this that isn't very memorable. So it's a 2 out of 5. I don't think it's great, but there are fun bits, and I think the fight sequences and battles are more exciting than they were in Thor. They aren't letting Chris Hemsworth be funny, but he at least has some kind of a levity about him now, which was one of the things I didn't love about Thor, was just how heavy and leaden everything was. Yeah. But yeah, it's still not great. And I think they know that Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth don't have great chemistry because Natalie Portman spends most of this movie asleep. So yeah, 2 out of 5, not great. Next one up is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Which everybody loves, but Captain America: The Winter Soldier was the first one that, for me, even, I think it came out in 2013, so I would have been 13 at the time. When I saw it, even as a 13-year-old, I was like, I didn't like that. and it was the first film in the MCU where I was actively just kind of like, man, that ending went on forever, and it was just kind of gray and boring, and so I'm worried those are gonna crop up as things I dislike even more as an older person. But we'll see. I wanna give it space to improve, as I've given a lot of these films. This ranking has not turned out anywhere near what I thought it would be. If you told me Iron Man 2 would be at the top of my list 8 movies in, I would have told you were joshing. But here we are.
Perhaps they would be jossing.
Oh no, don't remind me of...
Because Joss Whedon?
I'm dreading Age of Ultron more than anything.
It gets better. It gets better, Zach.
All right. Well, shall we move on to the rundown, our oldest segment?
Zach gets to waste one more minute of my life on Italian horror this evening. Zach, you're going to start this one, I think.
Okay.
Mitchell, are you prepared?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Zach, do it.
Squeaky Gurneys.
2 out of 5.
Thunderstorms.
3 out of 5.
A-Bon.
3 out of 5.
Angry Townspeople.
3 out of 5.
I was looking for keys.
1 out of 5.
Eyes Close-Ups.
3 out of 5.
Brainwave Machines.
3 out of 5.
Hacking into someone's flesh because it's fun.
2 out of 5.
Actual historical locations.
3 out of 5.
Funk soundtrack.
3 out of 5.
Liza.
1 out of 5.
Horrifically imprecise monotone dubbing.
2 out of 5.
Quicklime Crucifixions.
2 out of 5.
Only ADR sound.
3 out of 5.
Murals.
3 out of 5.
Joe.
5 out of 5.
Painful contact lenses.
3 out of 5.
Dickie the Good Boy.
5 out of 5.
Dickie the Bad Boy.
1 out of 5.
Untalented actor surprise face.
2 out of 5.
Room 36.
2 out of 5.
Freeze frame scream.
3 out of 5.
Eye gouging.
4 out of 5.
1 second, headshot sometimes.
4 out of 5.
Yes. Yes.
Nice.
We
That
got
was
to the
good.
list, which
That was
means we don't need
speed.
to do any more Fulci rundown.
Speed.
We're going to have a finale rundown that's like 3 things long.
Yeah.
Um,
Mitchell, what are we going to be talking about next time?
Something that I like for once. What were you going to say, Christian?
Oh, nothing. I'm just excited to hear it. Yeah. What is it?
Oh, okay. I don't know, Zach. Let's see Paul Allen's next episode.
I can't
There's
believe
so many memes. What?
that Mitchell likes Paul Allen's films more than mine.
Mine's bone white. What am I gonna do? American Psycho, 2000. Mary Herron, Jared Leto, Christian Bale, obviously.
Yeah.
Chloe Sevigny,
Yep.
Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. Pretty acclaimed movie. I think one of the only reasons why I'm doing this is because I saw Zach give it a 3, and I think, like, most of the general population disagrees with Zach. So I wanted to see what Christian did. I wanted to see Christian's time
I have
with this,
no
'cause
idea where I'm going to land on
I've
this,
seen
but
this
I'm
a couple
excited.
times. I've seen this 2 times, and both times I enjoyed it for completely different reasons. So I'm very interested to see what my third go-around is and how we talk about it.
The musical and the book are also great. So if you want to do any extra research before next episode, I recommend those 2. Matt Smith was in the first run of the musical. Okay, well, if you want to tune in next time to see us discuss American Psycho, which I think will be a lot of fun. I think it's due for a rewatch, at least for me. Then please tune in. Until then, how do you say goodbye in Italian? Ciao!
Arrivederci.
Pow.